Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 64, I believe, of the Don't Be Ridiculous podcast. We took a few days off for Christmas. Hope everybody had a lovely holiday. We had, it feels like football all the time these days. We got bowl games. We got games on Saturday, or NFL games on Saturday. We got Thursday. We got Monday. It's a wild one.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to talk about all the NFL stories out there. We're getting down to the end of the season. Teams are starting to make changes, and we got the playoffs on the horizon, and we got 2 regular season games left. We got the college football playoff games on Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, and So yeah, a lot going on. But first and foremost, as we always do in this podcast, it's time to suffer through another Dolphins season. They looked, Miami. It seems to have happened to them a lot this season. They play pretty well in the first half, and then just seem to completely shut down in the second half. And so pretty rough loss. The Dolphins didn't score in the second half of the game. They had 3 straight drives with a chance to take the lead or tie the game, and they had 3 straight interceptions. So not a good finish. It was honestly, the last 4 games were all games the Dolphins could have won, and they managed to not win any of them. So that's surprising in the NFL. Usually, you can find a way to win 1 out of 4 games, unless you're a terrible team. But yeah, it was one of those things, really, really frustrating loss to not be able to beat the Green Bay Packers, who are, a really average team at home.
Yeah. It's basically like, it's one of those things where you go into December, and a lot of people talk about how important the month of December is to see like who the real teams are and who's just, they won a bunch of games early and they're not going to be around later, or they're not going to be able to make a run in the playoffs, right? And so while, Dallas, for example, has been like up and down, and they just won a game. Granted, it was against the backup quarterback for the Eagles, but still, so you're kind of going, oh, that's all right, that's good. Minnesota, we don't trust them, but I mean, they've won some games of late. There's been some other like the Jaguars have started to come on. Even the Packers have started to come on now. And so the Dolphins enter the month of December, and it's like, all right, let's see what you guys are made of. And they didn't even get, if you were grading them, they didn't even get a C. They got like an F. I mean, they literally failed every single test. I mean, basically in the month of December, they went 0-4, because there's no more games in December that they're going to play. The next game will be New Year's Day. So, they failed every test. So it's basically like anyone who thought that they were a Super Bowl contender or a serious playoff team, I think they just showed you that they're clearly not. So,
yeah, I think the major thing that I take out of especially the last 2 games is that, my criticism of Mike McDaniel the whole season is that I don't feel like he manages the games really well, and I don't feel like he manages the quarterback very well, or as well as he should. Right, the last 2 games against Buffalo and Green Bay, they clearly were running the ball very efficiently, and they had the ball in the fourth quarter with a chance to do something, and they didn't run the ball enough. They had 18 carry in the game against Green Bay. They had 18 rushing attempts. The Dolphins are last in the NFL in rushing attempts. Okay, so. They had a chance to do things with these games, but instead McDaniel wants to come out with this aggressive offense, and we're going to throw the ball all over the place. And there's a time to do that, right? When you're down by 21 points against Baltimore earlier in the season, that's a time to do that. And there's also a time the Dolphins had a 10-point lead with the ball at midfield, and Mostert fumbles, leads to a field goal there. The Packers get a touchdown to tie the game on the first drive of the second half. So that those last 4 minutes of the first half and the first 4 minutes of the second half, Green Bay dominated that period of time, right? And that's a lot of these NFL games are kind of decided in those, they call them the middle 8, right? Those middle 8 minutes between the first half and the second half, and the game completely flipped in that area. The Dolphins were moving the ball really well. If they had done anything, in the third quarter, like, the crazy part is it's not as if the Dolphins needed to play really a whole lot better than they did in order to win these last 4 games. They just needed to play a little bit better. And so, I feel like we understand what Tua is now. Like, if you put a bunch of good players around him, he can be pretty good. He can win some games. But if you don't manage him correctly and you're throwing the ball too much and not running it enough, you get yourself into trouble. Plus, the Dolphins' defense is kind of average this year.
Yeah.
So if you put them in good situations, and I'm not blaming the defense for that loss. The defense played well in that game. But when you throw the ball like the Dolphins like to do, you expose your defense. And that's what happens in these games. So I just feel like McDaniel, like, the formula for the Dolphins is for Tua to throw it about 25 times, which is exactly what he did in that Green Bay game, and then try to run the ball to control the game, to protect your defense and to protect a lead. And the Dolphins against Buffalo, they had the ball in the fourth quarter. They ran the ball once. On the last drive, they had the ball. They only ran it one time.
Yeah.
Right? The last drives against Green Bay, they kept trying to throw it, even though running the ball was all they really needed to do.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's a disservice to the team that the coach, McDaniel, cannot figure out, this is what do we need to do to win games. Instead, they want to believe that they can be this really explosive offense, and it's kind of fraudulent. They're not, they're not the greatest show on turf Rams team. They don't have that kind of offense. Their offense is good, right? But it's not going to go out and light everybody up every week, and they can't just throw away. They can't just abandon the run and just, we'll just throw the ball. The last 3 interceptions were really bad.
Yep.
Really bad. I mean, there's no way to talk yourself around it. They weren't tip balls. They were just bad decisions.
Yeah.
And bad throws.
Okay, so I basically agree with everything you said there. In terms of the game management, I think that there's a and this is kind of funny though. It seems to be with the way McDaniel's managing the games, and then also with the Tua fanatics, there's an inability to accept what Tua is and play within that. There's still some sort of, he can be this and he can be this elite quarterback. And look, people need to really understand something, that after a certain amount of time, you can make judgments about somebody. And I think it feels like a lot of when analysts are talking about this, they're talking about this year or just the last month. No. Tua's been in the NFL for basically 3 seasons now. Okay? Now, he hasn't started every game in those seasons because in the first year it was either A, he wasn't good enough yet, and he wasn't very good in the first year even when he played. Okay? Or B, in year 2, he kept getting hurt. And then in year 3, and again, when I talk about him getting hurt, I'm not blaming him for that. It's just he's a smaller player. There are times where it's like, dude, just get down, don't get hit. But some of it's just because he's a smaller guy. Okay? And he's had injuries throughout his football playing career. Okay? And then in year 3, he's been unavailable because it seems like he's having an issue with head injuries, which I don't wish that on anybody. I don't want him to keep getting hurt. But we'll get into the head injury thing later. But so we've got 3 seasons, to kind of judge him on. And so what we found is, if you have a good defense, or if you have a defense that's getting turnovers, then I think you can win games with him. Just don't let him lose the game for you. Don't let him try to win the game, and don't let him lose the game for you. That's kind of what we found out in the first 2 seasons, right? Because even in the weeks where, like, I mean, at the end of last year, the way he played against New Orleans and Tennessee and the Patriots, he was terrible. Okay. Now, granted, they didn't have the kind of offense that they have this year, but, by the end of last year, I mean, I even said it on the podcast, I was done with it. I'm like, this guy can't play. Okay. He proved this year he can play, like you were saying, especially if you put better talent around him and you have better offensive coaching. Okay. But still, there's a ceiling. Okay. And we've seen him hit it this year. Okay. Against bad teams, he can put up some really good numbers. And the funny thing is, if you look at some of his numbers now, some of his numbers are still good. Okay? And so the QAnon people are like hanging their hat on those, saying, oh, well, he's still really good. Guys, if you're watching these games, you know he's not really good. Okay? He, the end of that Packers game is just, people need to understand how important that is, what that says about you as a quarterback. Okay? One of the biggest things that an elite quarterback does is drives at the end of the game. Okay, when you really, really need it, they know you're going to throw. The quarterback takes you down the field. You get the field goal, you get the touchdown, you win the game, or you go to overtime, or whatever the case is, right? And outside of, I guess, the end of the Ravens game, which he had that game-winning drive there, which that was impressive. I mean, the touchdown pass he threw in that game, But when you get into November and December, obviously the games matter more. Teams are trying to get into the playoffs. The competition level is much higher. And, the games are just more important. They mean more. And so the level of competition is going to be higher. So you've got to raise your game up. And Tua just, like I said, there's a ceiling. Okay? He's not going to, you're not going to just hand the ball to Tua and be like, go win the game. Now, I'm not saying if he plays another few years, I'm not saying that he might not do that a few times, but it'll probably be in the beginning of the year in a meaningless game, or maybe it'll be a one-off sort of thing, but he's not a guy you're going to rely on to go win the game, and he's proven it time and time again. Okay, so, it's just, I think Kurt Warner there was a quote I saw from Kurt Warner where he said, you've got this really talented roster and you need your quarterback to go get it done for you, and he just can't get it done, and that's just a punch to the gut. And so that's really what it is. Now, it's not as much of a punch to the gut to me and you, because we were kind of saying this stuff about Tua for a while, but for a lot of fans, I think some of them, even the hardcore people, might be realizing, wait a minute, this guy's kind of he's not up at that level. So
yeah, when I watch it, I just see it as this is Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, it's Jimmy Garoppolo with San Francisco. There's certain throws he can make and certain throws he can't. And the coaching is good enough to know, okay, we're going to ask him to do the things that he can do, not the things that he can't do. But when it comes down to the end of the game and the last drive, and you've got to now make it happen, that's hard for him to do. And what disturbs me is I have not seen an adjustment, to the way the defenses are playing them. Defenses are just taking away the middle of the field, and they've decided we're only going to let you throw these passes, and that's it. And the offense still hasn't adjusted to it. He's not really good. Tua isn't very good at throwing the ball to the outside the numbers, partly because of arm strength. If you're throwing to the outside, the defenders now have time to get to where the receivers are. But the way to combat that is, like, if you watch the San Francisco 49ers, they run the ball really well. They play really good defense. And so that kind of stuff can work. The problem is the Dolphins don't have the running game that San Francisco has, and they don't have the defense that San Francisco has. So it ends up falling on the quarterback. And I think, and just like we've said, this is what he is. This is how the team has to play in order to win. And I don't think, for Miami to be a serious contender, they're going to have to get a lot more in terms of talent around the quarterback and fill in a lot of these gaps that they have if they're going to have any chance to win.
Yeah. And do you think that because I've heard people saying this, and I don't know. There's different times I've watched where it feels this way. Do you think Tua is a one-read quarterback?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, some of those interceptions were basically he just decided where he was going to throw the ball before the play, and basically just didn't really. So that's kind of disturbing. I feel like, but I also feel like he throws passes like that in every game. It's just in this game, Green Bay caught them all.
Yeah.
Like we've been watching this the whole season where that game against Pittsburgh, I mean, there should have been 3 or 4 interceptions.
Yeah.
And they weren't caught. In this game, the defense caught the ball. So it ends up looking really, really bad instead of just, making bad decisions. Now they come back to bite you. I think, look, we can see where Tua is, right? He's right in the middle. He's right in the middle of all the quarterbacks. He's probably the 15th best quarterback in the NFL. And,
on his best day. Yeah.
Well, and this is what you kind of get, and so do you want the Dolphins to make the playoffs?
Well, okay. So this is where this gets interesting because, and we've talked about this a lot, like there's a tendency to be like, God, I don't really want the Tua Tagovailoa era in Miami to be that long because there's limitations and I don't, unless everything breaks right one year, you're not really going to go that far in the playoffs or anything. And so then you have the question of, well, what are they going to do with Tua? And them missing the playoffs or making the playoffs obviously factors into that. So in, I guess in March, I think, they have to decide on the 5th-year option on Tua's contract because he's in year 3 of a 4-year deal with a 5th-year option. So,
right.
And Albert Breer was on Colin Cowherd yesterday, and I think he said that, if they don't pick up the 5th-year option, then that would be kind of weird, him playing in his 4th year without a contract after that. So that almost raises the question, well, do they kind of have to do that? I don't know. But, in terms of them making a decision on that, like if they miss the playoffs, and look, let's say Tua doesn't play, he's most likely not going to play against the Patriots. Let's say he doesn't play against the Jets, okay, and they miss the playoffs. They're going to have missed the playoffs because of December, because of the 4 games in December, because they couldn't win like 2 of them, at least, And you can put a lot of that on Tua. Not all of it, but you can put a lot of it on him. And so then it becomes, okay, so if we don't have enough talent around him, then he's going to look really, really below average. But even if we do have talent around him, now granted they could have more, but even if we do have talent around him, there's still limitations, and we still might not even make the playoffs. So then it's like, now if they make, but even if they make the playoffs, that's what's weird. Even if they make it, then it's kind of like, well, let's assume Bridgewater plays the last 2 games and like they win the last 2 games. Then you're like, well, what the hell are we going to do now? What the hell, and the funny thing is, I'm saying that the Dolphins are wondering what they're going to do, but I kind of feel like Chris Greer and the people who were there before McDaniel, they already know because they were trying to get Tom Brady and they were trying to get Deshaun Watson. So they already kind of know that this quarterback is limited. So, I don't know. At this point, I kind of don't really think it matters if they make the playoffs or not because they're not going to do anything if they do make the playoffs. And I don't necessarily think that this sways things necessarily one way or the other toward them, the decision they're going to make on Tua long term. So,
I think, I think they need to make some changes. So I would rather they didn't make the playoffs because they're not going to win anything, and if they get in, and even if they do, they're getting the 7th spot, which that didn't even exist a few years ago. So I think because I've been on record. I want the general manager. The general manager should have been fired last year. Chris Greer shouldn't have a job. He's not doing a very good job at it. He put in all his chips into this team this year, and they're 8-7. So they went all in on this, and it still didn't really work out.
Yeah, the 5 draft picks for Tyreek Hill, I just, it's one of those things that's like, yeah, Tyreek Hill's really good and he's put up numbers, but I mean, when Tua's limited the way he is, I mean, it doesn't matter. So it's kind of like you wasted all those picks that you could have spent on, I don't know, more running backs or offensive linemen or defensive playmakers, whatever. So
yeah, I think though, like, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the quarterback, but I said halfway through the season, I'm done blaming the quarterback. The quarterback is a known commodity. This is on the coach. This is on the coaching staff. They didn't have this team. Number one, they didn't have this team ready to play in a couple of these games. That's number one. Number two, they did not manage these games correctly like they should have, and they easily could have won. Of the 4 games, they could have won all of them, right? But they definitely should have won at least 1 or 2. So this to me is on management, because they have a good enough team to make the playoffs. There's no excuses for them not to be able to make the playoffs with the way the AFC is. Like that, they might. And by the way, I still think they're going to make it anyway, because even if they lose to New England, they can still get in by beating the Jets the last week. I still think they're going to get in anyway, just because of the way this whole thing shakes out. Because even if the Patriots beat them this weekend, the Patriots have to play Buffalo the last week. They're not beating them. The Jets have to play Seattle. They have to go to Seattle. That's not a gimme. And then they've got to play Miami. So, I think, that being said, I think handicap-wise, they have a good chance to make the playoffs still. It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would rather they just don't make it, and let's get the general manager out of there, and McDaniel needs to go through this offseason and look at all of the mistakes that he made, because some of the things that he did wrong cost the team games and cost them.
Yeah.
They would be in the playoffs right now already if he had just managed a few of these games a little bit better.
Yeah. You can believe in your quarterback. That's fine. But you need to believe in it's not. You don't have Patrick Mahomes. You don't have Josh Allen. You don't have Joe Burrow. You don't have Justin Herbert. You don't have a guy who's going to make plays beyond the X's and O's. You need to. All right, we're going to make these plays with this guy, and I need to have this other stuff around him working right, and then we can win. Because look, he's proven it. He can't. You're not going to get these game-changing, game-saving plays from Tua. It just doesn't happen. I'm watching, you see stuff that Mahomes does, you see stuff that Josh Allen does, you see stuff that these other guys do, and it's just like, Tua's never going to do that. So,
but he does make enough plays to win games and make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, okay, going out those last 3 drives, and we're going to put it on the quarterback. Okay, well, at a certain point, it's not the quarterback's fault anymore. At a certain point, it's your fault for putting it on this guy, when this is too much for him. And by the way, it came out, let's talk about this for a minute. It came out that he had a concussion. So that could be part of the reason why he was just kind of throwing the ball errantly all over the place. So awesome. It's a bit disturbing that, he gets a concussion again, and now he may miss the rest of the season because of it. So yeah, these are things that you have to take into account.
That's what's going to be part of the evaluation of Tua in terms of him getting another contract is, well, not only do we know he's limited, but he's starting to get head injuries. And that just becomes now he already had when we were talking about injury concerns, like before the draft, it wasn't like, oh, he's going to get concussions. No, we were just like, oh, he had a hip injury, or he'll get knee injuries, or he'll get broken ribs or something. We weren't thinking about, head
and he's had those too. But as far as we know, he's had at least 3 concussions in the last 3 months.
Yeah.
As far as we know. Like God knows what we don't know.
According to what the evidence, I think they're saying 2, because they're saying he didn't have a concussion in the Buffalo game. Make of that what you will. I don't know. We can all pretend that we're doctors and watch film and say, oh, that looks like that guy has a concussion. I don't know. But
yeah, so going back to before the draft, everything that most of what we've said would probably happen has happened. He's either injured or there's a limit on how he plays, and the Dolphins are stuck with an average quarterback. And I don't think there's any place else to go. This is the team you have. You've got to do the best you can with it. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of options. But before we wrap up the Dolphins talk, do you have any interest in the Dolphins trying to get Derek Carr?
Okay, so not just Derek Carr, but let's just because I'm hearing Jason McIntyre on Colin. Okay, guys, a lot of the people floating this stuff out there. I know it's fun to do these kind of things, but is there really any evidence that the Dolphins are going to go after one of these guys? I mean, granted, I know that they went after Deshaun Watson and they tried to get Tom Brady. I get it. But, I don't know. It just feels like they're kind of, as much as I'm saying there's limitations, and obviously if you want to win the Super Bowl, you're not going to do it with Tua. I still think Tua's the quarterback in the first game of next year, and they probably pick up the fifth-year option. Okay? Beyond that, I'm not really sure. I think the odds have swayed more toward maybe they're not going to give him another contract, but we'll see. As far as these other ideas like Derek Carr or like, they should go after Lamar Jackson. Okay, stop. Lamar Jackson's going to get franchised or he's going to sign an extension with the Ravens. Okay, stop. That's done. Okay? Derek Carr, I mean, I don't understand why you would want him over Tua. Because
I mean, look, he's been
about the same.
He's been really bad this year.
Yeah.
If this was the beginning of the season, I think that there it would be clearly everyone would be saying Derek Carr is better than Tua, and I think Derek Carr has more talent than Tua does.
Yes.
But he's been really bad this year with the Raiders. So now I don't know what to think, right? And after we've watched these quarterbacks get traded and flame out this year, like Russell Wilson, right? Now that we've watched these kind of things happen, I don't know what to think. But Derek Carr's cap hit is not very much next year. I don't think it would cost that much to get him. The problem is the Dolphins don't have a whole lot left to give because they've, mortgaged their future for so much other stuff. And Derek Carr is going to make a pretty good amount of money.
Yeah.
He's going to make significantly more money than Tua does. So I'm not against the Dolphins trying to upgrade at quarterback because obviously that's what they need to do. And if we don't do it now, if they don't do it now, they're going to be doing it in a couple years from now anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm not against it, but I don't know. I just I find it hard to believe that Chris Grier if they miss the playoffs, that Chris Grier gets to keep his job. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how that works. I feel like he went all in on this, and if this doesn't work, I feel like that's the end of the road.
Not only that, he went all in on this, and if they make the playoffs, they're going to be the last team in. So, and I just and I understand that fan bases like to get excited about just making the playoffs, but I mean, look, when you're the 7th seed in the playoffs, how much does that really mean? Okay, that basically means that coin flip a couple games you won that next year you might lose. So,
Yeah, so overall, we'll see what happens. If the Dolphins got into the playoffs, that'd be something. But disappointing the last month.
Is Tua going to play if they make the playoffs?
I have no idea. that I have I couldn't tell you. I definitely don't think he's playing this week against the Patriots. After that, who knows? But as Colin Cowherd was saying, I get it. Tua's fighting for his job. So, no, he doesn't really give a rat's ass about medical diagnosis or anything like that.
Right, yeah.
If he's cleared to play, he's going to play.
That's one of the brilliant things I heard. And Colin's, every now, sometimes, there's a lot of times I'm listening to Colin, like, what the hell is he talking about? But every now and then he pulls something out where it's just a really great point, where he's basically saying it's easy for us in the media to say Tua shouldn't play the rest of the year or Tua should just reevaluate his entire career based on getting head injuries. But, think about, and he had Nick Wright on there talking about, think about how much it took for Tua just to get here. So he's supposed to just give it all up now. Now, again, you and I can think about this any way we want to. We're not in his shoes. We're not in his situation. Okay? He's he really is fighting for his career at this point. Because look, if he doesn't, if the Dolphins don't give him an extension at some point, then he's going to be a backup quarterback somewhere. So he's fighting for his chance to be a starting quarterback in the league. So, and obviously that's important to him because he worked hard enough just to get here. So he's supposed to just give it up. That was a really brilliant point, and it's really low hanging fruit and really annoying because this has happened twice now this year, where all these people they're going on Twitter and saying, "Oh, Tua should just hang it up." Oh, really? It's that easy? Okay, sure. It's not like he's Tom Brady who's been playing for over 20 years and has 7 rings and multiple MVPs and stuff. It's, I'm fine with you saying he should probably retire, but I mean, Tua just started his career. He's just trying to get going. Like, he's supposed to just give it up that quickly. So, yeah.
Look, if he's medically cleared to play, I don't have a problem with him playing.
That's up to him. He knows the risks.
It's not my decision. It's not my life. And the coaches should not be involved in that at all. You know what I mean? The coaches are there to win games. It's their job to win. That's all they're there to do. So if he's their best chance to win, then he's going to play. So anyway, we've blowharded enough on that all day. All right. So the rest of the NFL weekend, I mean, I got to be honest. I'm not trying to be elitist here, but man, that's some bad games on. My goodness. Some of these games are terrible. Now, part of it was the weather, right? Pretty much everywhere in America is under a snowstorm right now. Or, right. Well, they were last weekend anyway.
Yeah.
So, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff that jumped out at me, but, first of all, now with Jalen Hurts still injured, are the Eagles in trouble?
Well, they're off. One of their offensive linemen's out for the year, I think. So that's a big deal. And then they're saying it's an injury to Jalen Hurts' throwing shoulder. I don't know how serious that is. That sounds pretty bad if it's to your throwing shoulder. So, and then if it's like, is he going to play the rest of the regular season? Because then if he's not, it's like, okay, so then you're going to put him in the playoff game after he hasn't played in a month or 3 weeks or whatever it is. So, that's really concerning. Although I do find it kind of funny that so many people are crawling out of the woodwork thinking that, we should like the Cowboys more than the Eagles. Why should we trust either one of those teams? The Cowboys, we have a history of not trusting them because that's what they do. The Eagles, I mean, this version of the Eagles, like, they haven't done anything. So I don't know, the Vikings, we don't trust the Vikings because at every turn they show us they can't really, they're just kind of, they're not really going to beat good teams.
Right. So then that opens it up to the rest of it. Like, everybody can win the NFC now if that's the case. And
well, I kind of think a lot of people could have won the NFC anyway, even with Jalen Hurts, because we're basing what we think Philadelphia's going to do off the regular season, and obviously things are a little bit different. I mean, if you wanted me to, gun to my head, I'd pick Philadelphia, but you can make a case for Dallas. You can make a case for the Vikings. I'm not going to buy it, but you can make a case for the Vikings. You can even make an outside case for the fucking Buccaneers, who are hanging around somehow. I'm trying to think of who else. You can make a case for the 49ers. And then I'm trying to think of who else is, I guess Green Bay's trying to get in. And then you got, the Giants. I don't think you can make a case for the Giants. I feel like the NFC, there's about 4 teams you can really make a case for.
Yeah, but I mean, and listen, Philadelphia, I think Philadelphia just needs to win on Sunday, and then they clinch the 1 seed and everything. So if I'm Philadelphia, that's what I'm focused on. And Gardner Minshew played well enough for them to win. They didn't win. The defense, gave up too many points, but
right.
But yeah, it would concern me that Jalen Hurts might not play for a month and then have to play in a playoff game. So yeah there's definitely concerns there. Especially like if they have to play the Cowboys again, which is kind of how it's looking. What it looks like that is the most likely outcome from at this point, assuming the seeds hold where they are. But yeah, now if you're anybody in the NFC, you think you have a chance because why not? If I'm San Francisco, who cares if we're starting Brock Purdy? Like we have, our offensive and defensive lines are really good. We got loads of talent. So yeah, this makes the I mean, the NFC playoffs were going to be interesting anyway, but this makes them really interesting. This takes them to a whole other level if the Eagles are not what they used to be. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that, I mean, man, the Jacksonville Jaguars are one of the hottest teams in the league.
Yeah.
I mean, right now they're in the lead for their division, and all they have to do, I mean, Tennessee has to play Dallas on Thursday night, and Tannehill's out for the year. So Jacksonville may have the division clinched before the last weekend anyway.
Malik Willis can't throw. So, yeah. The Titans offense, first of all, it wasn't good this year, even with Tannehill in there. So, yeah, it's – and Derrick Henry's been used so much that I just kind of – he's the same guy.
And he's doubtful for the game on Thursday, tomorrow night. So they may be done real quick. So, I mean, I got to be honest, Clark. I think Jacksonville has a great chance to win a playoff game.
So they would be the 4 seed?
They'd be the 4 seed, and right now they would play Baltimore.
Okay.
You know, and I mean,
is Lamar Jackson coming back? Like what? You know,
I don't know. I don't know what's happening there. So this could be really fascinating. You know, as far as that goes, like who knew, you know, we would stop talking. The Dolphins would be iffy to make the playoffs and Jacksonville might win a playoff game. That didn't look like the situation 3 or 4 weeks ago. So incredible comeback by them when they were in a lot of trouble earlier this season. So
yeah,
I got to give credit to Jacksonville. So we already talked about the NFC being wide open, but you know, I just put a question on here. Which wild card team do you think could be dangerous? So I'll just read them off to you. Right now, we'd have Baltimore, the Chargers, Miami, Dallas, Washington, the Giants, and then you've got the teams outside of it that could get in. Obviously, the Patriots, the Jets, the Seahawks, the Lions, the Packers.
Chargers, Dallas.
Yeah, obviously Dallas could be dangerous, and I think the Chargers. Anytime you have a quarterback that's that good, you have a chance. Especially
beyond that, I don't really. The Dolphins, the Jets, the Patriots. I don't trust any of those teams. Particularly the Jets. I don't know what you're getting out of the quarter, and the Jets and the Patriots. I don't know what you're getting out of your quarterback. And then the Dolphins. I don't know what's going on with Tua. So. I just don't. With Herbert, you know, he's obviously they've gotten healthier, and so I think he's obviously come on at this point in the season. So, yeah, and he can just make those plays that just, you know. And the Cowboys, look, if their defense comes out and is ridiculously good, then they could go to the Super Bowl. You know, their defense has been they've had some games where they've really shut teams down, and then they've had some games where they've given up a lot of points. So, and then Dak, you know, is Dak going to play well enough? You know, can you get enough of what you need from him to win games?
Yeah, and I mean the Raiders are benching Derek Carr for the last 2 games. I mean, it looks like it's partly to keep him healthy, and then partly, you know, to keep their options open. So, I definitely think the Raiders are obviously open to moving him.
Right.
You know, so anyway, let's talk
next
about.
Year it'll be on the Colts, and they'll have. I'm trying to think of a random name of somebody who can be the Colts head coach. Let's see. They already had Jeff Saturday, so that means they'll hire Brandon Stokely or. I'm trying to think Dallas Clark, or I'm trying to think of random names of people that Jim Irsay will hire to be the head coach. And, you know, the GM will be like, well, we don't want to draft somebody because we don't really know what's going to go on. So we feel really confident having Derek Carr as our quarterback.
Yeah. You know, speaking of that, you know, the Denver Broncos fired Nathaniel Hackett. You know, this was a move we probably could have seen coming about the 3rd week of the season. The whole thing in Denver has been a complete disaster. I can't remember. They were debating this on Bill Simmons' podcast. Which trade is worse, the Deshaun Watson trade or the Russell Wilson trade?
I mean, it's got to be the Russell Wilson trade. Like Deshaun Watson, he's going to get a full off season, you know, and then he'll start next year. And like, Cleveland could make the playoffs. Denver. I mean, first of all, okay. This is one of the problems with the media. Sometimes they don't really get in depth enough on stuff, or if they do, it isn't covered enough. Okay, first of all, the idea that Nathaniel Hackett would be a good NFL coach, I don't know that there was a lot to base that on. Okay, and then second of all, trading for Russell Wilson, okay, you're trading for a guy who's in his mid-30s. He's been getting hurt. He's not as good as he used to be running around, which was kind of what made him great. Okay, and the Seahawks are comfortable moving him. Okay, so it's like, all right, fine, I guess we'll trade for him. Okay, and then he has his own parking spot and his own private office. And he talked about earlier in the year how the offense is a partnership with him and Nathaniel Hackett. So that's weird. I don't know of another situation like that. Or put it this way. If you can think of another situation like that, were they successful? Because it seems to me like there's probably got to be a lot of resentment building toward Russell Wilson in the locker room based on all the special treatment he's getting when he sucks this year. I mean, he absolutely sucks. I mean, we criticize Tua, but Tua's been putting up numbers this year. Okay, he's had some pretty good games. Russell Wilson is terrible this year.
Yeah, he's been really, really bad. It's unbelievable. It's so shockingly bad that I don't ever remember a quarterback who was on the path to go to the Hall of Fame, who changed teams and all of a sudden now looks like he doesn't know how to play quarterback anymore. And they've basically he's basically been benched. So it's a little it's really disturbing. And the whole thing was a mess from the jump. And I'm not sure what the Denver situation is, but they don't seem to have one voice either. They seem to have it's like the amount of owners that they have looks like the panel on The View. There's 5 people. They bring out the Denver Broncos owner and it's 5 different people, and so it's a little bit strange. There's no other NFL team that has that situation. So, and they gave him this gigantic contract. So Denver is really, really screwed. Cleveland, I still believe, they actually gave up more draft pick wise for Deshaun Watson than Denver gave up for Wilson because there were more players involved in that trade. But yeah, I think, Deshaun Watson's a lot younger. So he actually has a chance, to be pretty good and dynamic. And he's also not a small quarterback like Russell Wilson is.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where it is that Russell Wilson can go. And I hope this marks the time where NFL teams stop messing around with quarterbacks that are under, that are barely 6 feet tall, these smaller quarterbacks, and thinking that they can just overcome it. Because I just don't buy it. We'll talk about it when we get closer to the NFL draft, but
I think Kyler Murray has just flamed out this year. I don't know what the hell is going on with him, and every year at the end of the year he flames out. So it's just one of those. I don't know if that's a coaching thing or what, but I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, guys, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, if you are not a big dude, it is going to be very difficult for you to play quarterback, for an extended period of time at any sort of elite level. So.
Right. And the things that Russell Wilson did that were elite were outside of the structure of an offense.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson is not an elite, drop, get your back foot, throw the ball, get it out quickly. He's not elite at a lot of those things. He's elite at a lot of other things, or he used to be anyway. And so, yeah, the whole paradigm has shifted, and we got to stop messing around with these smaller quarterbacks. It's just it's a pretty tough deal.
Well, I agree with you. The team should stop, but I mean, they can only play with what's being given to them. And I mean, there's going to continue to be smaller quarterbacks because smaller quarterbacks are able to succeed in college for various reasons. So,
right, yeah. But when you look at this NFL draft, most of the guys are pretty big.
Yeah, except for Bryce Young.
Bryce Young's the only one that's scarily small. And I think, and honestly, I think there's a lot of talk right now, but I think when he goes to the combine and everybody sees that he's pretty small, I think that's going to scare some teams away. And if Houston takes him number one, I just think it's a gigantic mistake. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. But before we get out of here, we got the college football playoff games coming up on Saturday. TCU against Michigan out in Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl, and then Ohio State and Georgia in Atlanta for the Peach Bowl. What's your early sense? Well, not early, but what's your sense on these games going into them with a few days to go?
I mean, I would think Michigan should win. But, if they're going to run the ball a bunch, then, depending on how TCU's defense plays, the game might be close in the second half. And if that's the case, then, TCU might have a chance. But, it should be one of those things where Michigan's offensive and defensive line should, kind of dominate. And assuming they do that, then they're going to win. But we'll see. A lot of these games, they've kind of let teams hang around. Georgia, you would think that they should really beat up on Ohio State. Even though Ohio State has receivers and, maybe they can kind of make some stuff happen. C.J. Stroud, I don't know. He's obviously very talented, but, there's times where I'm watching him kind of like, if he's not chucking it down the field or he's not just going with what his first read is, I don't know, how competent is he, in terms of throwing to his second or third guys and, making stuff happen that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I honestly think both these games are close at halftime. I think that Michigan, they tend to come on strong in the second half. I think Michigan will physically be too much for them, but I expect TCU to be in the game in the third quarter, and then Michigan probably take it over like they have done basically the whole season. And then, I think Ohio State's going to come out kind of pissed off that everybody thinks, doesn't think they have any chance. And I think they may play well in the first half, but I think, for the same reason, I think Georgia physically, eventually takes over. And if their pass rush is really good, that could be a problem. The things to watch, I think, watch early in the game. If TCU can't stop Michigan running the ball in the first quarter, that game could get really ugly really fast. And if Georgia is able to get a good pass rush on Ohio State early, then that could turn that game into a mess really fast. But I think eventually Ohio State's defense will take the game over. That's kind of what happened last year. Ohio State played Alabama. The defense just kind of took the game over. And so, but I do think Ohio State might be competitive for a while. I think the same thing with both games. I think both these games could be competitive going into the third quarter. And I think at that point the better team is gonna show up. And I think Georgia Michigan in the final would be a hell of a game.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Hopefully we just get some good games, because a lot of times there's a lot of build up to this stuff, and a lot of these games are, particularly the semifinal games, a lot of times are just garbage. So hopefully they're good.
Yeah, a lot of them are blowouts. I hope people watch. It's on New Year's Eve, which is
I think they will. New Year's Eve happens to fall on a Saturday, so I think people will.
But so definitely looking forward to that. I do feel like the NFL season is now like, we definitely didn't need 17 games. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm fine with it that we have 17 games, but I really don't feel like we need it. It's just kind of an extra week that's kind of unnecessary, but we'll see what happens. And listen, I wouldn't put it past the Dolphins to beat the Patriots. That game's now going to be a slugfest. Neither team is really good at doing anything. So
yeah. Can I just say something that I think is really ridiculous? Okay. For NFL analysts, you can't in one breath say that Tua's not very good and you're not really sold on him, and then in the next breath say, yeah, but without Tua, I don't think they can beat the Patriots. Okay. If your argument is that Tua isn't very good, it should include the fact that against the Patriots the last few times, Tua has played like shit. Okay, he really wasn't very good the first game of this year. He was terrible the end of in the last game of the year last year, and in the first game. Really, he had like a couple good drives, and that was it. And then I'm trying to remember his first year. I mean, he wasn't very impressive against the Patriots. So I find it kind of funny that you're like, oh, well, they're not going to be able to beat the Patriots without Tua. I think they have about as good of a shot as they would have with Tua with Teddy Bridgewater.
Well, and have you watched the Patriots play? I mean, they since they no-showed the first 3 quarters of that Cincinnati game, and I mean, it's I don't know that they're going to be able to. They're going to have a hard time scoring. Both teams are going to try to run the ball, which means both teams are going to be up front to try to stop the run. So I expect that game to be low scoring. Dolphins are getting 3 points. I would take the 3 points because I don't think either one of these teams has any ability to pull away from the other one. This will be decided by a turnover or a field goal or something like that. I don't expect Bridgewater to come out there and tear it up, but he has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to throw the ball to. I expect him to make some plays. Is he going to be unbelievable? No.
Well, so the Dolphins are approaching this week as if Bridgewater is going to start, so he's getting all the reps.
Right. So my hope would be that Mike McDaniel goes, oh, you know what? We got to win this game by running the ball.
Yeah.
And protecting our quarterback. I hope that he manages to do that because so far this season he has not done that no matter who the quarterback is. He goes out there swinging with Skylar Thompson playing. So I hope that he makes the adjustment because that would be a really dumb move to come out there and just go, no, we're going to sling the ball all over the place, even with our backup quarterback.
No.
So, I hate to be a Dolphin. We hate to come off like Dolphins haters, okay? But we got to tell the truth also. We got to be fair. We got to tell the truth. And the Dolphins have been pretty disappointing as of late in games that they had opportunities to win. Those games were there to be had. This wasn't an opportunity. This wasn't a situation where the Dolphins had no chance and the other teams just had more talent. They could have won every single game.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that you have to understand. First of all, most teams in the league do not have an elite quarterback. Okay? Most do not. So a lot of games are decided by a possession. Okay? And so when games are decided by that much, coaching decisions in terms of, going for it on fourth down or kicking a field goal, using a challenge, not using a challenge, offensive play calling, do we run the ball here, do we throw the ball here, do we run the ball on 3rd and short, do we pass it on 3rd and short, what kind of plays should we be running against this defense based on what we've seen from this team throughout this game, a lot of it'll come down to that, and it'll be a few plays here and there where it's like you made the wrong decision and then you lose the game, So, and if you don't have an elite quarterback to raise you up and just make those outside of the box plays that can make up for bad decisions, then, you're going to lose these games. So,
yeah, hopefully McDaniel, proves that he's worth it as a coach these last 2 games and does what he's supposed to do.
Yeah. We'll see.
Anyway, all right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for listening. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and, we probably won't talk to you. Everybody have a Happy New Year.
Yep.